Support us on Patreon. Join for exclusive perks like AMAs, live calls with me, and a vibrant Discord community. Enjoy ad-free content, early podcast episodes, and access to my emailer, plus behind-the-scenes stuff. We've built our channel on Patreon support, so a huge thanks to everyone who has helped. If you like these live chats, head over to our main channel where we have all sorts of video on this World Cup. There'll be several every week with all the latest trends, stories, and incredible historical content.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 61 of the Uncovered podcast. I'm Behram Kazi. You can find me at DefMango on Twitter. And with me is jarrodkimber, as always, and Estelle Vasudevan. You can find her at Estelle_Vasude and the number 1. Real tongue twister that. But anyway, we've got lots to talk about today. And well, top of the itinerary, it's a lot of chaos that has ensued in both Pakistan and Sri Lankan cricket boards. So Estelle, I'll hand it to you right away. You have the floor. Tell us what's gone wrong with Sri Lankan cricket and why have they been, or the board, why has it been suspended by the ICC?
And try and keep it to under 7 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have it all written down because, to be honest, I'll probably miss something because there's been so many things happening. I mean, today I think 3 different things happened. So anyway, at the moment, there's a new sports minister. The suspension that was given by the ICC on the 10th of November, so far the only repercussion has been that Sri Lanka have lost hosting rights to the Under-19 World Cup. So basically, if I go through what happened, there's kind of been some friction between the sports minister and the SLC board for about a year now, beginning from around the time that he was appointed, actually, where he's been kind of alleging mismanagement by the board. And as Jarrod would know, I mean, mismanagement and SLC, it goes hand in hand, right?
I thought that's why they were hired.
So basically, it all came to a head when Sri Lanka bowled out for 55 against India in the World Cup. And then in the days that followed, the secretary of SLC decided to resign, Mohan De Silva. There is talk that was not related to the performance, but I guess we won't know. SLC also asked for explanations on strategy, team selection, player performance, etc. from the selectors and the coaching staff in the middle of the tournament. And in the meantime, there was a threat from the sports minister, a caution from him that he wanted the executive committee to step down or else they would face severe consequences. And he, true to his word, he decided to sack the board on the 6th of November, so 3 days after the loss against India, I think. Decided to sack them and appoint an interim committee which was to be headed by Arjuna Ranatunga. And he was the only cricketer in the interim committee. Two other appointees had political connections. They're sons of politicians. So, I don't know, for someone who's trying to say that they're trying to clean up cricket, it was a weird route to go through. Anyway, the very next day, there was a stay order obtained by Shami Silva, the president of the executive committee, and the interim committee was not able to function beyond the 1 day during which apparently they went into the SLC officers and, did whatever they wanted, right?
What a day, though. What a day they all had.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there were press conferences, there were photo shoots, I don't know. Yeah, whatever they could milk out of those 24 hours, it all happened. And also then, in the meantime, we heard that the president of the country had expressed that he was not, or he didn't know about this appointment of an interim committee, and he would much rather go with another subcommittee to look into what was going on at SLC. And the sports minister was not happy with that because according to Sri Lanka sports law, he has the right to dissolve any sports associations as he pleases. Anyway,
by the way, that sounds like a great rule.
Yeah. So, I mean, after that, there's kind of been a clash between the sports minister and the president, in that, it's not ever direct, but in the parliamentary sessions, the sports minister would say certain things, that his life is under threat, that people are trying to do stuff to him. And I mean, in a country where there are areas where there are no x-ray machines, they spent hours and hours discussing this cricket issue in the parliament. Anyway,
are the president and the sports minister from the same political party?
Now it's a big mess right now. There's nobody in the same. I mean, you can't keep track of who is in what party anymore, because there's been so many. I mean, president is not an elected by the people president. He was brought in during the chaos that went over last year. So anyway, on the 10th of November, ICC suspended SLC, and ESPN reports that SLC wanted that to happen, in the sense that they
I can second that. I've got that. Independent of ESPN, that is definitely what happened.
Yeah, so that SLC got themselves suspended just as a warning sign to the government, or whoever government players were involved, that there can be serious consequences if you interfere in what's going on. And a couple of days ago, November 27th, the president decided to sack the sports minister from all his portfolios, because he was just, I mean, I think in a month of mismanagement of doing things, it was the worst thing he could do. He kept going on in public and talking about how his life was under threat, and the president wasn't listening to him, and things like that. Anyway, he lost his position, and now Harin Fernando has been appointed as sports minister. So he does seem like a more someone who would work better with the Sri Lanka board. So there is hope, at least, that the suspension will be lifted. But to be honest, there weren't really that many. I mean, the only repercussion, like I said, was that we lost hosting rights to the Under-19 World Cup, which is a big, which is a big repercussion, in that some of the clubs had spent money in refurbishing and stuff like that. But other than that, Sri Lanka were allowed to play bilateral, so that will continue until hopefully soon the suspension will be lifted. I hope I got everything.
I mean, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So if I'm just going to put out something here. Let's say Sri Lanka made 200 against India, right? How much of this wouldn't have happened? Is it the embarrassment of how bad they were at the World Cup, with then a game that kind of set all this off? Because let's be honest, I mean, you and I, Estelle, a couple of years ago, did a podcast called The Sri Lankan Omnishambles, which was about very similar kinds of things, really, and how badly it was operated again. It's not like there's been a time when Sri Lankan cricket was well run.
I mean, Motivate Today says SLC board is corrupt. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock.
I mean, we don't even know who they are. Usually you'd have to say allegedly corrupt, but we don't know who the people are we would even be calling corrupt are, so it's okay. But do you know what I mean? If they hadn't have been embarrassed in that game, would this be very different?
I think it was coming for some time, because this kind of animosity between the board and the sports minister has been brewing since the last Asia Cup, where Sri Lanka didn't host and decided to move it to the UAE. From that point, I think there were these little rumblings, like, what is SLC doing? And then it's an ego thing, right? I mean, new sports minister, he wants to show everyone who's boss. He's got the law of the country behind him. But unfortunately, or fortunately, doesn't have the president's backing. But I think it would have happened, but it wouldn't have happened in the middle of the tournament like it did when, Sri Lanka weren't even out of the World Cup technically when all of this was going on.
And also important to say that at one stage, Arjuna started saying that Jay Shah was running Sri Lankan cricket. And I want to mention that for two reasons. One, most people don't know who Jay Shah is, right? Outside of, in India and in cricket, he's famous. He's not like famous to a normal Sri Lankan person, right, on the street. And two, it was very clear that SLC were happy with the suspension and played along with the suspension. And like, I don't think Jay Shah was in there going, "Oh, we need to suspend Sri Lankan cricket" or anything like that. Like, quite clearly, the ICC, as has happened before with other boards, decided that perhaps the best option here was to play that card in order to clean house so that they could start again.
Yeah, I mean, there's a comment also which says Mitchell Johnson's article on Warner is not a topic. Maybe if we've got time. But
well, we did SLC, and me and Estelle have a video coming out about this. So there's so much more fun stuff that needs to be mentioned. But I just want to ask you, Bayram, being that we also have to clean up the PCB here. Well, not actually clean up the PCB. That would be impossible. But my first question about the PCB is, was Salman Butt's reign as selector the best thing that ever happened or the worst thing that ever happened?
Was Butt's reign as a selector consultant, longer than Tamim's retirement? That's a better question, right? Because both of those things were like really, really short. And it's funny how Estelle is talking about all of these political interference instances, and it's eerily similar, with respect to Pakistan cricket. And also, both of these countries have gone through economic turmoil. And we also have a prime minister who wasn't elected by the people. So there's a lot of crossover over here. But I'll come to Butt. I've got a whole chronology of events.
You just said Butt three times in a row then. But okay,
yeah, of course.
Start us at the start of the PCB thing.
Yeah.
So we did a big podcast a while back saying that Pakistan had done maybe one of the most transformative things we'd seen, where they went in with Mickey Arthur, who was like a director of cricket, but he was working remotely. It was a very professional setup. They had analysts involved. They had general managers from the PSL. Like, it was really professional. And we also said, how long will it last? Okay.
Yeah.
Update us on how it's gone.
Well, it's gone to absolute shit. I remember at the end of the podcast, you said that in 1 year or 2 years' time, what we'll be talking about. And I said, hoping against hope, it's going to be a success. And it was a radical shift, and there was some hope over there. But boy, did they shit the bed and light it up on fire, as you like to say. Let's start at the start, right? Musical chairman. That's what the PCB has been playing. You had Ehsan Mani and Wasim Khan, their era. They got the sack, and Ramiz came on Imran's request, who was at that point the prime minister. Now, Imran gets a vote of no confidence. Imran is gone, and the new caretakers of the nation, they stick with Ramiz for a bit until he makes an absolute mockery of the pitches, and Pakistan don't win a single test in the home series. So now Ramiz is sacked. He's gone, and in comes Najm Sethi, who has also been a former PCB chairman. And Sethi is adamant, right? He's like, I want Mickey, even if I have him in Pakistan for 1 day and he can spend the rest of his time in Derbyshire. He just really, really wanted Mickey Arthur back. And he completely, revamped the coaching staff. And at that point, you're like, okay, there's still some time for the World Cup and you've got a lot of games. Maybe they can figure something out over here. And Mickey Arthur has had some good days as Pakistan coach in the past and knows these kids and everything. So it wasn't all gloom and doom at that point. But then Sethi is gone. Sethi is replaced by Zaka Ashraf. And now all of that planning that this one chairman did, there's a new guy and he's saying that my dick is bigger. And that's basically what it is in Pakistan and Sri Lanka and the subcontinent, right? And all this while, post-Ramiz, Babar Azam has had no confidence from the board, right? They've basically set him up for failure. I'm not saying Babar is a great captain or that sort of stuff. Or I'm not even saying that this is the reason Pakistan won only 4 games out of 9. But they didn't really give him any confidence. They were like, we'll see after the series. And at the very last moment, we know that Babar is in fact going to be leading Pakistan at the World Cup. Stuff like that, right?
So there's a thing in American sports which they call a lame duck coach, which is when you go into a season and you don't have a contract for the next season. And so there's this whole thing of, when you go into those sorts of situations, it's much harder to lead because you have no job security. So you're making all your decisions from a position of, I need to keep my job and everything else. And we see it all the time. We never talk about it in cricket, but we see it all the time in cricket of like, you are captain until the day after the World Cup. It's like, that means I'm probably going to make a lot of panic decisions, right? And we saw that with Baba.
Yeah, and I mean, look at Kane Williamson. He is an elite captain. He just lost a test in Bangladesh. Had this been Babar Azam, he would have been sacked. Or at least that conversation would have started, right? Now, here's the fun bit. Zaka Ashraf comes in and he forms a technical committee. Misbah is a part of it. Hafiz is a part of it. Inzi is a part of it. And Inzi goes on to make himself the chief selector. So one person from the technical committee makes himself the chief selector. Now, fast forward to the World Cup, right? Pakistan still have fate in their own hands. They're having a stinker, but they're still very much in it. If they win all their games, they make the semis. And the PCB publish a press release in which they basically say that, hey, your team's still in it, so support them. But yeah, once this World Cup is done, we'll take corrective measures and in the best interest of Pakistan cricket with respect to the captain and team management. So they're basically saying, you guys support them, we've lost all faith, right? So they've thrown the team under the bus, including the captain and team management, when you're not even out of the tournament. And Pakistan lasted a bit longer as well in the tournament, funnily enough. They definitely overstayed their welcome, I suppose, in certain ways, because they were really, really bad. So now this press release thing has happened and all hell has broken loose, right? Everyone is talking about it. Everyone is cursing the PCB. Inzi resigns as chief selector because there's a conflict of interest, because he is the director of this firm that is also has some other directors who are part of this agency, which manages a lot of players. So Mohammad Rizwan is also a director in this firm. And I'm not saying that there was any malintent over here or Inzi awarded people like selection like that, because Rizwan, Shaheen, Babar, these guys picked themselves. There's no, I don't know. I don't think Inzi really overstepped his bounds over there. But the point is that he could have. You're putting someone in a position where you could hand out favors, and that is a direct conflict of interest. And you're asking us regular citizens, I'm talking about the Pakistani state, to sign tons of forms and provide tons of documents to do anything. And you appointed a guy as chief selector without checking where else he's working. So Inzi's resigned now. Hafiz also resigns, by the way, in this time period. And then there's a WhatsApp conversation between Babar Azam and the COO Salman Nasir, which is leaked by a sensationalist TV channel. And people are watching all of this stuff. And in the midst of all of this, the players haven't been paid for 5 months. Let's not forget that, right? That's a very, very important key detail. And the
look
chairman...
just look at Estelle's face of just being like, I'm having to live through everything that's happened in Sri Lankan cricket recently, but with a different team. It's like, it's like she's being told about like bad boyfriend behavior, and she's going, "Wait a minute."
All I'm thinking about is that Spider-Man meme, because it seems like
that's exactly what it is, and it gets worse, right? It gets far, far worse because the WhatsApp conversation is leaked. All hell has broken loose again. The chairman, Zaka Ashraf, comes and gives an interview to the worst ever sports journalist you could give it to. Everyone hates that guy. Okay, he is sensationalism 101. He will say whatever will get people to hate him. That's the way he earns his bread and butter. And I'm not even joking about this. People who probably know of Shoaib Jatt can second me in the comment section over here. And this stuff happens. Shahid Afridi criticizes the PCB. He's invited to the headquarters. There's a photo op. Of course, there's a photo op, right? There was even a photo op before the India-Pakistan game when Zaka Ashraf literally went to India and met the team before that big clash. Why? What are you going to offer over there? Are you going to tell Babar what line to play or where to pitch the ball to Shaheen? Like, what's your job over here? You can only possibly add more pressure, especially when Pakistan has never defeated India in a World Cup ever, in an ODI World Cup, mind you. So all of that stuff is happening. This photo op is happening. World Cup's over. Babar resigns from captaincy, all three formats. He writes up this tweet and it's really graceful, goes away with a lot of integrity. And the PCB publish a press release again in which they contradict Babar. They're like, we let him go from the white ball formats and we asked him to stick around in tests, but he said no. So, you really, really want to draw the ire of the public at this point. People will hate you willingly. And it seems like you want that. Some people started making a joke that they want to, take away all the criticism from the actual players because they're such a big shit show. So maybe there's some merit to that as well. Anyway, Zaka Ashraf gets an extension. Of course he does. I mean, business as usual. And Wahab Riaz is the new chief selector. So Wahab is also, by the way, listed as a player in the PSL. And Wahab is also the sports minister of Punjab, which is a province in Pakistan. So where is the conflict of interest right now? Like, it's out the door. And really, at this point, everyone's baffled. And guess what? New team director, Mohammad Hafiz, the guy who just resigned. The guy has no management experience. He was a professor, but doesn't have any teaching experience either. And Hafiz, the director, goes on to appoint himself as head coach. And he's going to be the head coach for Australia and New Zealand. And right now, they can't even sack Mickey and Bradburn. So they're actually still with Pakistan at the NC in Lahore, working with the younger guys, Whereas Hafiz, someone who has no coaching badges, will be the head coach for Australia and New Zealand, a test tour to Australia, a place where you haven't won a test match since Sydney 95, is where Mohammad Hafiz, who really didn't have any scores in Australia either, he's going to be the head coach with zero experience, and he's played with these guys. Right? Babar was Hafiz's captain. And now Babar is not captain and Hafiz is his head coach. So it's all muddled at this point. And they've done this before with Misbah. Now, I respect Misbah a lot, but he didn't have any coaching badges either. You need to have these, minimum eligibility criteria or whatever.
Was it, West Indies is I think Darren Sammy, was he the latest coach to be getting something like that as well? Someone was telling me, I don't know if this is true. I haven't had a chance to look it up yet, but someone was telling me it's similar. So we are starting to see it a little bit more in cricket, where it's just like, former player, come and run the team. And it's like, we just spent all this time saying that coaching is a real job, but now we're doing this again, right?
Exactly. And then also, Fakhar Zaman scored that ton versus New Zealand. You're awarding a cash prize. You're not paying the players for 5 months, but you're giving a cash prize to Fakhar Zaman. People started, including myself, making a joke that where's Maxwell's cash prize? He's also a reason why you're still alive in this tournament, right? His double 100. Yeah. So now let's fast forward a bit more. Wahab Riaz, the chief selector, appoints his best buds from Model Town, Lahore, Kamran Akmal, and former captain, tainted captain, Salman Butt as his selection consultants. And, of course, Butt was removed after a day and all of that. But Wahab comes and says, I think people should move on. And, I think he has a great cricketing mind. Like, are you really that naive that you think that the people won't speak up with respect to Salman Butt? And he says that the media created some sort of propaganda that there was nepotism, or he was helping out his friend, and that he's like this former tainted person. Well, who is this media? I'm looking left, right, and center. I don't see anyone speaking out against it. I only see people offering their unwavering support to Salman Butt. And this is what's fucked up about Pakistan. A woman will do absolutely anything over here and she'll get victim blamed, but Salman Butt should be forgiven. The guy who was test captain, and at Lords, he orchestrated all of that spot fixing scandal, right?
So just let me, if he wants the media going against someone, and it's a bit late now, but let me orchestrate a little bit here. Salman Butt gave testimony, right, under oath, saying that cricket was no different to wrestling, and that it was all fixed, and everyone understood it was fixed, and it was fine, and what he did wasn't wrong. He has not apologized for any of that. He has not really done anything. There are players who have got in trouble with match fixing, who have worked with the ICC, with ACU, with cricket boards to help train young players how not to get involved with that. As far as I am aware, Salman Butt has done none of that. Certainly not made it public.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't. And Salman Butt cried conspiracy for like 4 to 5 years that, this is like some sort of mastermind plan to, denounce Pakistan cricket. Whereas Amir, albeit like I'm not a Mohammad Amir fan anymore either, and I had some sort of sympathy for him because he was a kid, but he's shown his true colors over the years. But at least he owned up and went through that rehabilitation.
Exactly. Right. So but, if you want us to forgive Butt, then he actually needs to come out and start saying exactly what he did, what the situation was, helping young kids not get in the same position, helping the ACSU and ICC work out how to, stop these sorts of things happening again. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense to pretend that that he is just a normal player who got slapped on the wrist and we should all forget it. That is not what happened here, right? As you said, if you're a player, it's a little bit different. If you're a captain and you're in charge and you are actually getting other people actively involved, that is a whole nother level, right? You have betrayed on so many levels, and he doesn't give a shit. And it's ridiculous. Every time they try and give him a job in Pakistan cricket, I'm like, what are you doing? At least make him apologize first.
Or, just the fact that, being announced or appointed as test captain for your nation is the biggest honor that you could possibly be bestowed with in our sport, right? You cheated the game. You cheated Pakistan. Anyone who's lived through the spot fixing scandal, even if people have forgiven him, we're not forgetting that shit, right? And also, if you held that position and then, corrupted the game, why should you hold a position of power again? He does this commentary gigs in domestic cricket. I don't even like that, but I'm like, okay, at least it's not a position of power. I'm disliking this, but sure. But I don't understand how people start calling me a hypocrite that, you don't say anything to Amir. I wrote a fucking piece on Amir 10 years ago. Go read it, okay?
But Amir is a completely different world anyway, because as you said,
studies are not the same.
Amir went out of his way. I mean, yes, he was trying to rehab his PR. We understand all these different things. And Muhammad Asif probably doesn't care about his PR. He's a different kind of dude, and he's off living in America doing the sorts of things he does, right? But Salman Butt went out of his way to defend himself again and again, and brought the game into more disrepute by doing that.
Yeah.
He hasn't been involved in anything else. He hasn't tried to rehabilitate his image either the correct way or even the dodgy PR way. All he really did was just end up like on a bunch of YouTube and crappy TV channels sprouting absolute nonsense, right? I'm sorry. He gets no respect. He shouldn't be involved in the game. And it's an embarrassment that he was, even if it was 22 hours, right? It's an embarrassment that for 22 hours he was involved with selecting young cricketers anymore. There is no other way to look at this. And if Salman Butt wants to come on the show and argue the point with me, he is more than welcome anytime to. What he did to cricket was a disgrace. What he has done since has been just as bad. And if he wants to change that and get involved with these sorts of things, he can. He knows more about fixing than most people alive do, right?
Yeah.
The good that he could do for this game is on another level if he really wanted to get involved. And I tell you what, I don't care if he's the best judge of talent ever. He is a toxic influence when it comes to cricket, and he shouldn't be involved. Anyway, at the very least, Estelle, you didn't have to go through this.
Yeah,
I'm not done yet. I'm not done at all. I still have stuff to say. I have a lot of steam to blow off, right? So, I mean, sure, people who say that Butt can be forgiven and all of that, like, how can you give that man a position of power who was your test captain? He betrayed you, and you have no right to select who gets to play test cricket for Pakistan, right? And I don't get this whole narrative that, God will forgive you, but people won't. Fuck that. I'm not having Salman Butt represent Pakistan cricket at all in any sort of capacity. And this is totally non-negotiable, and I will raise my voice for it. People say that I'm running some sort of propaganda. Bro, no one pays me. I work with Jared. I work 2 other podcasts.
I don't even pay him.
Oh. Yeah. Well, he does. But, I have no influence in that regard. I have more to lose by speaking out against the PCB, mind you. I don't have anything to gain over here. And also, then you're saying that, everyone should come and move on and stuff like that. Just totally not having it. He cried wolf for the longest time. He has shown no remorse. Sandpaper Gate. I know that Mitch Johnson said stuff against David Warner, but look at Steve Smith. Look at the remorse he's shown. He's a completely changed man. He's not the same guy from before. You can tell that he's, taken some corrective measures and he's trying to reform post Sandpaper Gate. Where is the reform when it comes to Pakistani fixes? I haven't seen any.
Also, most importantly, they admitted that they did it, right? Yeah. They may have pissed around for a couple of days. They may have done that stupid conference right after the game, right after that day's play. There may have been a lot of nonsense about how it wasn't sandpaper and it was sticky tape with sand on it or whatever they were saying to begin with.
For 22 hours?
Yeah, for about 22 hours. And then they said what they did. And that's a big difference. All right. So Salman Butt, fine. We can move on from him. What has happened? What else has happened? Give us the speed round of any other stuff that we need to know. Is that it? Is that the latest nonsense?
Pretty much. Shan Masood is the new test captain. So let's see how he fares in the series versus Australia in Australia. I mean, God help Shan Masood at this point, but if he wins a test match, he's a national hero instantly. Shaheen Afridi is the T20 captain. Sure, won a couple of PSLs as captain. There is no ODI captain, of course. Classic Pakistan.
Don't need that until the Champions Trophy. We'll work it out on the day.
Basically. And you have a support staff of 17 people traveling with an 18-man squad. And there is an assistant to the team manager. And that team manager is not Rehanul Haq anymore. He has been sacked. And this is all just a big cesspool of shithousery that the PCB has conducted. And I need a fucking Advil. That's what I need.
Assistant to the traveling secretary was George's job with the New York Yankees in Seinfeld. If anyone needs that. Look, I think it's interesting that the Sri Lankan Cricket Board were suspended, and I know they played a part in their own suspension, and yet somehow haven't made as many mistakes as what the PCB seem to have done. Is actually quite an effort, right? And we're talking about these two boards. Zimbabwe is going to be an interesting story over the next 3 or 4 months as well. You'll have to get a Zimbabwean expert to come on and yell and need an Advil in a little while, because that could turn very, very bad very quickly as well.
Estelle, though, I want to ask Estelle, what do you think now? Is Sri Lanka in a worse off spot than Pakistan, or is it the other way around?
No, I think it was competitive until like about a week ago. And then I heard about Salman Butt and I was like, okay, what's going on here? Because it just like you so passionately spoke about, it doesn't make any sense, right, for anybody. Even if it's just optics, it doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think Sri Lanka definitely now in a better position. I think they weren't really in a, I mean, despite the chaos, like it hasn't really affected the game per se with I mean the suspension. So they haven't been that bad. I mean, it's been weird to see it being discussed in parliament, and I think the coaching staff or somebody was summoned to the parliament last week and had to give explanations as to why they can't play spin. To I think some foreign minister or somebody was questioning them. So I mean,
That
there have been
reminds me
some
of
weird things.
that reminds me of a really weird one, which was a couple of years ago when the ABC decided to not get radio rights for India-Australia series. And so it would have been Test Match Sofa. I think it was even before they became Guerrilla Cricket or was splintered into Guerrilla Cricket. And like, there's literally the Australian Parliament. There was a politician going, "Why am I having to listen to these English people on their sofas make fun of us rather than listen to the ABC?" I love it when cricket gets to that level because the one thing that I have worked out in my career is there's a lot of very powerful men, old gray-haired men, and they're really angry about the most banal bits of cricket that you have absolutely no idea about, right? Like, I remember there was one English politician who contacted me, and I won't out him because he seemed like a lovely person, but he was like, should we make a big deal about the fact they're putting numbers on the back of players' shirts in Test cricket? And I went, no, it's been on the county cricketer shirts for years. It's okay. Let's just give the modern culture one on the back. So I do love it when really minute cricket stuff goes in, and I'd love to have like a big American style parliament where you've got all these footage up and you go, we can see here his back foot, and there's some old guys never played cricket before trying to explain it to a cricket coach. Anyway, I think it's fair to say the PCB have gone to another level than SLC, and good on them, because hey, if you're going to do something, do it right.
And I mean, I don't think any PCB management or whatever. Let's not forget that Zaka Ashraf has done a lot of unconstitutional things in his tenure as well. His son's been managing things at the PCB, I hear. I mean, Osman wrote a really thorough report on all of this on Cricinfo. You guys can go search it. But yeah, I mean, if you're asking from a Pakistan supporter perspective, really there's no expectations anymore, because you're like, oh, they'll outdo themselves, next time. They'll find a way. They surely will.
Yeah. Could I find one final question, and then we'll go to a break? Do you actually miss the Rambo era, Ramiz Raja era? Because as stupid as some of the stuff he did was, kind of the boat was still upright at that point for periods of time.
I mean, take the pitches out of it, because I think that was just everything kind of goes to shit, right? People just look at the pitches and you're like, oh, we don't care. Look at the pitches. But if you just take those things out, he did empower the team. He did empower the captain. Pakistan had some good results at that time. And at least he spoke with some sort of cricketing knowledge. Yeah. What is Zaka Ashraf going to tell me? And why are these people here? Just because of the political shit that's going up on top. So yeah, it's just, it's the Pakistan Clownery Board. That's what it is.
I remember that when I did the podcast with Wasim Khan, so many angry Pakistan fans telling me he was a disgrace, and he ran that organization so well, and now there is literally it is being one of those little birds that goes down and pretends to drink the water and coming up. That is literally what is running PCB at this stage, right? Like, it's
absolute shambles
to go from that. Anyway, I was going to say take a break, but then I realized that you're on the show and that's your job.
Yeah, so we'll take a short break and be back with some more cricket stuff. Bangladesh versus New Zealand, that's a test match that we're going to talk about. So yeah, stay tuned. You're watching Uncovered with Jared, Behram, and Estelle. We'll be back after this short break.
If you follow my work, you'll be very tired because I produce a metric ass ton of content, and I can't do all of that myself. I also can't afford an army of people to do it for me. So what I needed was a solution to get all my analysis, hot takes, and random asides out on social media. And I found that with Memento, the AI tool that basically takes all of my work and cuts it up, makes it look pretty, and pushes it all over the internet. If you have content and you need to repackage it, use Memento. If you enjoy our content, we ask you to hit the like button, subscribe, or drop a comment along the lines of, wow, Jared, your vibes are immaculate. Additionally, sharing our work on social media, supporting us in super chats, and helping us out on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee all mean the world to us. Like our stuff? Please support us by whacking that subscribe button like it's a short ball. Or you could just leave a comment expressing your admiration, such as, "Wow, Jarrod, you're the Aubrey Faulkner of YouTubers." Also, please help us spread the word by sharing our work across social media, back us on Patreon, or also support us with live super chats.
Welcome back to episode 61 of the Uncovered podcast. You're with Behram, Jarrod, and Estelle. And Bangladesh defeated New Zealand in the first test of that 2-match test series. And Jarrod, our man Shanto, first match as captain, wins it for Bangladesh, scores a ton. What an arc.
He's such a ridiculous human being, isn't he? Because you remember in the Asia Cup, he was looking like one of the better batters in the world. And then you get to the World Cup and he looked like, one of us was out there batting. And then suddenly... And I remember all these people, they were like, and they did this, without trying to egg me on or anything, but they were like, "Jarrod, why do you like Shanto?" And I said, "Look, you just have to see the full Shanto." And unfortunately, you're seeing about the 10% Shanto, which is the worst Shanto in the world. I mean, when Shanto is bad, he's basically a bucket of bile. Like there's almost nothing that you want to see there, right? And then when he's good, he's just rainbows and lollipops, right? Like it is. I can't think of another player who oscillates so much. Maybe Sean Marsh was a guy who was a bit like that, where you just like Sean Marsh either looked like he could not bat or no one could get him out, and there was no middle ground with Sean Marsh, right?
Hafiz as opener at times. Yeah, he was like that.
Unless he was facing Jimmy Anderson, but that's yeah.
I mean, unless he was facing Dale Steyn.
Oh, Dale Steyn, yeah. Well, actually, unless he was facing any good seam bowler, maybe. I think you don't see that very much, and I think with Shanto also, if you look at Hafiz, he had his bowling. If you look at Sean Marsh, nepo baby, comes from a family of cricketers. His sister's an athlete. I think his mum was an athlete as well.
His brother's a 2-time world champion.
Yeah, and I think so. I think with Sean, that they at least knew. Whereas with Shanto, it's like even the people who were picking him were like, "We think he can play, but he's averaging 15, and we don't understand." And he seems to be averaging 15 in like every format that we pick him in. And then, but when you saw him, in fact, it was a Patreon member. I was talking to him the other day. Who we were talking about this. That I kind of just decided this guy was never going to be any good. Like something. I was trying to explain this. Someone else wanted to do my job the way that I do it recently. I said that you have to really compartmentalize things, right? So there's so many different things if you're trying to cover global cricket that you have to remember at one time. And when you see a player like that, you can't, like, if you're a Bangladesh fan, you're like, "Oh, no, maybe he's good or whatever." But in my mind, I have to be like, "No, he's done. All right, move on." Yeah. And I had moved on from Shanto, and then suddenly you see him emerge. And now, of course, the fact that he's leading the side, this is a great win for them. I thought it was a really interesting test match, right? Really up until that last innings when Bangladesh got on top. But great win for Bangladesh as well. I think there's this feeling that Bangladesh always win at home, and they've got this great record at home. It's just,
but they don't.
It's not. Yeah. Lots of teams have gone in and beaten them recently. They had that little period where they played good against Australia, England, and maybe one other team. I can't remember who the other. Maybe West Indies.
New Zealand. It was New Zealand.
Yeah, you're right. So they had a little period where they played okay, but mostly they still lose a lot at home. So this is a big thing for them to do again. Look, I think if you've never seen him bat, it is worth watching him in full flow because he really is. He's a joyful player. And part of that is why he fails so much as well. I think, he's almost too excited, too excitable. Yeah. But he is a beautiful player when he's doing really well.
Yeah, the jury's still out on Nazmul Hussain Shanto, and I like it.
It's not out. They love it. Everyone loves him.
Everyone loves him. All right. Another person, Estelle, or cricketer in Bangladesh's test team, who I feel like goes under the radar a lot and is very underrated, at least in home tests, is Taijul Islam. Now, the left-arm off-spinner did take 10 wickets in this test match and was one of the critical performers who led Bangladesh to victory. How much of him have you seen, and what's your take on him?
Yeah, when you said someone who goes under the radar, my mind was like, it's Taijul Islam, right? Because he doesn't play limited overs cricket. And like Jarrod mentioned, there's this weird misconception that Bangladesh are really good at home in tests, and they're not. They have, I think, haven't beaten. I think New Zealand's probably the highest ranked team they have beaten in the last 10 years at home.
I mean,
Uh,
Pakistan defeated them 2-0. India won a
yeah,
test in Bangladesh, and then Kyle Mayers scored that
Yeah.
double hundred or something,
yeah,
the masterclass in Chattogram. So, yeah, you have those test matches, right?
yeah. But Taijul is I think it's because he plays in a team that isn't really doing that well at home, because their limited overs teams are different, right? They are quite good in T20 and ODI cricket at home with slow and low pitches, and he doesn't play, so he does tend to get overlooked. I think he's very much in the vein of those. He's not really doing a lot, but he's doing enough to kind of be successful on those tracks.
Jared, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the problem with left arm, any finger spinners really in Bangladesh is that, in 5 minutes time, they're going to find another good one anyway. And, as Estelle said, if you don't play all three formats, and, obviously Shakib and Mahdi Hassan, they're kind of the two most famous ones. But I almost feel it. And if you look at Pakistan cricket over the last couple of years, like, if they picked the fifth best finger spinner in Bangladesh, they'd probably be the best finger spinner in Pakistan, right? Like it's got to that level where there's so many quality bowlers coming through, and Pakistan isn't creating bowlers like that anymore. And England's not really creating finger spinners like that anymore. And maybe we hope with Moti, West Indies is finally finding another one. So Bangladesh have like a ton of them, and so I think a player of his talent is not. I mean, underrated is probably fair, but also it's just that if it's a bit like being Natarajan in India, right? Like we still know that Natarajan is a fairly good player, but India just had so many other seamers at a certain point that you could kind of just move him to the side and forget about him a little bit. But he's played a lot more than someone like Natarajan, and I had a lot more to him. But I'm going to tell you, I'm trying to think of who the player was. Was a former England player, and I was asking about Asif Karim, the Kenyan player. And
of course you were.
Of course I was. And I said, you faced him. What do you remember? And he said, what did he bowl? I said, left arm finger spin. He goes, Jared, do you think I'm actually going to remember any left arm finger spinners I ever faced? Come on now. And the truth is that is kind of how cricket works, right? Like, even off spin, we don't tend to remember that much, but left arm finger spin is so interchangeable. And in Bangladesh, where literally they breed them so much that they had to make one of them their cricket info correspondent, just tells you how ridiculous it is. Yeah. So look, I think he's a fantastic bowler. But again, I just think it was a big moment for them. I think we are in danger now of thinking that they're just like a proper major team. We just saw again in the World Cup where they're still fragile, and I think it is a young team developing. They no one's going to be shocked having listened to the first half of this podcast, but there are some issues with the BCB as well, and also some issues with senior player and empowerment and everything else. You got Angelo Matthews and Shakib Al Hassan and Tamim Iqbal, probably because of the eras they played in, got a lot more power than they should have.
I love how you said Angelo Matthews over there.
Well, the reason Angelo Matthews is a perfect example of someone else who he's not. I mean, Shakib is the only one of those three who's a real superstar player, right? Angelo Matthews touched it briefly, but probably didn't stay there as consistently as he should have. Tamim is a fine player, but like, how many test matches would Tamim have played for like New Zealand or Australia or South Africa, right? He might still have got games, but it's probably not going to end up being on that level. And Shakib's the only one. And even Shakib, if you had Shakib in a really strong cricket culture, he probably bats at number 6. And he's still a really good all-rounder, but doesn't bowl as much when he's away from home and all that sort of stuff, right? But because of the positions of their boards, those guys are really, really, and you can put Mashrafi in there as well. Those guys are really, really important, despite the fact that they don't quite have the playing records of some other players from other nations. And that warps things. I remember, I can't remember which Australian coach it was, but it was one of the Australian coaches who worked with Bangladesh quite a few years ago was saying to me, the issue is that you try and coach them to get them to be the best players they can be. They're already being told that they are the most important people in the country. And it's very hard to get through to those sorts of people. And he said, it's not the kids' fault because this is just a kid who is, can whack the ball or, spins it sideways or whatever. It's the problem with that, especially in Bangladesh, of these players being given more power than they need to at a young age, being told that they're the greatest things ever, getting politicians sucking up to them. I mean, look at all the different things that Shakib has got involved with over the years. And it is like, all Shakib really needed was a good mentor to go to him. Stop doing stupid shit. Stop pointing to your groin. Stop talking to people who want to give you free meals. If someone wants to give you a free meal in cricket, it probably means that they want something out of you. All those sorts of things that you need to have happen haven't happened over there. And hopefully this new generation, they can maybe navigate it a little bit better now that they've seen. I mean, we don't even talk about Ashraful anymore. Ashraful was a wonderful talent. So I just hope that Bangladesh cricket can develop the way that it should. There's still structural problems with it and everything else. But this is, again, I think we need to be joyous at every win they have. And it wasn't just their men's team that won this week. I know that, wanted to get to that as well. The women beat the South Africa. No, we're doing it now because I've already started.
We're doing it now? Okay,
sure. Because the women beat the South Africans. It was a bit of a, I know, South African B-side. I suppose all South African women's sides are South African B-sides now. So many of their players don't play for them. But you're still beating a team that is a high-quality, professional women's outfit. And 3 years ago, Estelle, Bangladesh women's cricket almost wasn't, just no one talked about it. It's gone from, it's probably gone from being well worse than Pakistan to being at Pakistan's level and above at times. And, when I first started covering women's cricket, I was told by people who worked at women's cricket, it never work in Bangladesh. And to be fair to them, they have really improved. I didn't see the game. Estelle, did you see it? Did you see what happened?
It's not on in Sri Lanka. But yeah, I think you're right. One of the key factors is that they became part of the Women's Championship. And that's allowing them now to play around the world and play a lot of teams. They were here a few months ago. And I think that kind of belief and attitude that they've built is what's keeping them at the top, because they don't seem like a team that's dependent. Like if you look at Sri Lanka and even actually to a degree South Africa, they're very dependent on certain players, right? Whereas Bangladesh, you're seeing a lot of young players who are really good in the Under-19 World Cup coming in and then performing at the senior level as well. I think the player of the match was a 16-year-old for this game against New Zealand. So a lot of young players coming in, and even at the Under-19 World Cup, they were definitely not pushovers. They were competitive against the big teams as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a fantastic point, because if you look at their results over the last few years, they've definitely gotten better. And even if it was a B-side, it's still South Africa at home. South Africa played the final of the T20 World Cup, right? So they are still a strong team. And you've got this 16-year-old leg spinning sensation, Shona Akhtar. She just performed in South Africa. That's not a place where generally you expect spinners to take a 5-wicket haul in a T20. And I felt like Jahanara was carrying that team for a bit. I don't feel the same way anymore. And just like Bangladesh, who obviously recorded an iconic victory versus South Africa, Pakistan also defeated the White Ferns in New Zealand, in Dunedin, for the first time, inspired by, of course, Fatma Sana, the emerging cricketer of the year of 2021. She took a 3-for, and also which included Susie Bates' wicket, which is big. And I love how the game is growing for women's cricket, and also it's getting far more competitive, especially in the last year. Even if you go back to the Ashes series as well, England won a fair few games over there. Jarrod and I have spoken a lot about this, Estelle. So I want your views on women's cricket as a whole and how it's evolving.
Yeah, I think you're right when you say that it's getting a lot more competitive, but I do still think that it's very much in kind of two different groups. Whereas you have the big three. You have Australia, who was, I think, well beyond the other teams for a while. They've gotten a bit closer now with India and maybe England. And then you've kind of got a second tier, which should be South Africa and New Zealand. But in my opinion, having watched New Zealand play here as well a couple of months ago, I don't think they are in the best place as a team. They're very, very dependent on 3 players in that side: Susie Bates, Sophie Devine, and Amelia Kerr. Kerr and Divine didn't feature in that game against Pakistan. They're very, very dependent on those three players. And maybe you'll see one or two others performing here and there. But any success that they have is based on those three players. And this is not criticism of them, but I do think that they've fallen behind a lot from where they were, where they were consistently kind of competitive with teams like Australia and England, right? But it's that lower tier that there's been a lot of improvement, I think. In Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you're seeing three teams that were not competitive at all, who are suddenly kind of pushing things with the bigger teams. And like I mentioned when I was talking about Bangladesh, the women's championship is huge for the development of these teams, because if you're not playing consistently and you're not playing good opposition consistently, you can guarantee there won't be success, right? A couple of years ago, I spoke to Shashikala Sirivardhana, who was captain of Sri Lanka for a while, and she told me that she played international cricket for 20 years. She toured Australia once.
Yeah.
So that's changing now, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
Shamari didn't have a deal for the longest time, and now she's lighting up the Big Bash League, right? So these are all good things. And I'm actually going to segue back to New Zealand again.
Just before you do, I just want to say also on that game, so New Zealand set them 127, right? And they got there with Riaz hitting Kerr for 6 at the end of that. And I promise you, when I first started covering women's cricket, there was not a Pakistani woman who looked like they were going to hit a 6, let alone one of the best bowlers in the world to win a game, right? Like it's so noticeable how much better they are. And I think probably PCB probably got a little bit embarrassed by the fact that the BCB got their act together as well. You know, but as Estelle said, if it's weird how when players play, they get better. When they don't, they don't.
I mean, don't even get me started on all the politics and bad stuff that's happening with women's cricket in Pakistan. But Alia
Ramesh
Riaz
Raja did a lot, right, for the women's game. I think
he wanted to have a women's PSL before the IPL. Like, to be fair to him, a lot of what he did was nonsensical, but he was really ahead on that one.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely said the right things. And then the new, Sethi's chairmanship, we saw these exhibition games happen where they called some foreign players and they didn't really mean anything. But Alia Riaz recently hit some sixes versus South Africa as well when they won that series. And that was a decently full side. I wouldn't say it was like their complete A team, but it was a really good team. Anyway, I'm segueing back to New Zealand because there was all this talk of finger spinners, and Glenn Phillips playing his second test match, bowls for the first time in test cricket, picks up a 4-for. Love that. And also, New Zealand might have lost, but Kane Williamson comes back and scores a ton. I really want to know who his surgeon is. Who is this guy? I want to hire him.
Man, needs a rest, doesn't he? It's I remember. I'm trying to remember. There was a sports scientist I was talking to once, and they said that if you could work out which athletes recover quicker from injuries, it would be a very handy thing, and it was something that they were looking into. Because the truth is that, so I always had this issue with my hamstrings, which is a back-related injury, and if you do them multiple times, it's usually something to do with your back. And they would just hang around. And I would have like a friend, like almost tear the hamstring off the bone and somehow be back playing before me, who's got like a mild strain. And so people do recover. And I just think that at this point, we need to look into Kane Williamson's physiology and see if there's anything we can replicate him. I think someone compared him to Wolverine during the World Cup, right? Like, that Adam...
Have we lost him? Can you still hear Jarrod Estelle?
No, I can't.
Yeah. I think we've lost him, and I can't even put an ad over here right now. But here's to hoping he comes back. We still have the Uganda qualification to talk about. Oh, there, he's back.
Right.
Jarrod, let's take a break because we still got some stuff to talk about. There's the bilateral contest and Uganda T20 cricket. So, yeah, let's do it. You're watching Uncovered with Jarrod, Behram, and Estelle. We'll be back.
Picture this, you made a video and now you want the world to see it in their favorite social media platform. You could bowl into the wind by slaving away making edits, or you could let Memento effortlessly cut those epic moments down, making them perfect for your social media followers. It's like having a runner. You play the shot and they do all the hard work. Sync up your podcast and YouTube, and they will be the substitute fielder who does all of the work. With Memento, you can craft a long innings down to the best highlights. Make your content, but let Memento cut it. If you're enjoying these live chats, our main channel has even more World Cup videos looking at the greatest performances, the quirkiest stats, and the epic tales of World Cup cricket.
Welcome back to episode 61 of the Uncovered podcast. You're with Behram, Jared, and Estelle. And let's move to the bilaterals, and then we'll come to Uganda. So, India, after losing the World Cup final to Australia, which is only their third loss to Australia in the last 10 games that they've played. So, talk about losing the important one. But India did defeat them by a margin of 4-1. Mohammad Kaif is really happy about it. And, even if bilateral T20Is are useless, that should definitely feel a bit better. And it would have been a whitewash, Estelle, had it not been for a 47-ball ton by none other than Glenn Maxwell, who had quite a great time in India, you'd have to say.
Yeah, I'm genuinely curious how many people actually had the energy to watch that series after the World Cup. Because honestly, that seemed like so much of cricket. Maxwell's going, I'm sure he's not complaining about how long the tournament was, because he's just going crazy in India. But India played like India played in the World Cup, right? They were good right throughout. Unfortunately, in the games, that didn't really matter in the end.
Yeah, Sky was captaining them, Jared, which is interesting because India always throw in a new captain. That seems to be a trend with them. And he got runs, Ishan Kishan got runs, Yashasvi Jaiswal, Rinku Singh, all of these guys, the youth really delivered. But the star with the bat for India was actually Ruturaj Gaikwad. And he scored 123 off 57 in that game that Maxwell literally stole from beneath India's noses. But where do you think Ruturaj now lies in India's depth chart? Because I see them giving him a lot of opportunities, and he's somewhat cashed in over here.
Yeah, I haven't really talked to anyone over there to see how they kind of feel about him, but my feelings were that they always thought he was a second-tier player. So sort of on that Sanju Samson level of very good player to have as a backup, the Indian Sam Billings type guy, right? It wasn't a very good Australian team. And it was a very good Indian team, even if it was experimental from both sides. With all due respect to Ben McDermott, probably going to be out in a World Cup, right? So I don't know from perspective. Do I keep dropping out? Am I dropping out again?
Yeah, somewhat.
Yep.
You are. Interesting. Anyway, till Jared's out.
Anyway,
yeah, there he is. Complete your thought.
So just I wonder if he's trying to force himself into the major zone. But I think we always have to remember with any of that, you have to look at who the bowling is and what Australia is trying to get out of this. Ben Dwarshuis is again not. He's a very talented player. Don't get me wrong, but not quite at that level. It is. It is a little bit.
For sure. Australia weren't playing the A side at all. And I like how India, though, even going towards the future, Estelle, you can answer this one. They've opted for youth with respect to their limited over squads for their tour of South Africa, right? And I really like that from India because they've got this plethora of talented youngsters and they're throwing them in the deep end because South Africa is not an easy tour. So that's something that's very promising and not very, synonymous with Asian sides.
Yeah, they got a lot of criticism in the build-up to the ODI World Cup as well, right? Because it didn't seem like they ever got that perfect 11 playing together for a couple of games consecutively. But in the end, it worked, like the strategy worked out, right? Whatever rest they gave Rohit Sharma or Virat Kohli, it worked out. So I think even with the T20s coming up in South Africa, you've got plenty of guys who you can try out, right? India's not, in the sense, if you take a different team like, I'll say, Sri Lanka or Pakistan, you almost have to stick with the same kind of core group of players throughout. because you don't really have more than two other options for those positions, right? I mean, Sri Lanka doesn't have even one other option for some positions, but with India, they do have the luxury of being able to try, and it's about, I think, finding a balance between giving players consistency, but also being able to look for what really works in certain positions. I mean, you mentioned Ruturaj. He may not even play the World Cup, right?
Yeah.
But the opportunity is given, allows them to see what they have, what options they have for those positions.
Yeah, that's actually a very, very interesting take. I agree with a lot of what you said over there, because there is this feeling that India don't play their regular squad enough for them to just go and do the business in a World Cup. But they did for the most part, barring the final. So that did work out for them. I'll take the super chat real quick. I think I am the best person to answer this. Why was Saklan removed as the coach before the World Cup? Well, Saklan, there was this popular notion that Saklan has no method to his behind his madness, and he runs on vibes. And as soon as Najam Sethi came back, he was like, I just want Mickey Arthur. I'll take Mickey Arthur for whatever deal you give me, like that's how bad it was. And sure, I mean, I like Mickey, but I mean, they really bent over backwards to get him, and that's just the truth.
Yeah, I think just to add on that, like, it wasn't just Mickey that he brought in, right? When he came back, Sethi, he brought back lots of people that he had worked with before. So I think I'm not saying that Saklan is a good or a bad coach in that situation. What I'm saying is, if he was a good or a bad coach, it may not have made any difference. They were making that change because there was it's a bit like a boss coming in and firing people in the office and hiring people they've worked with before. Very similar kind of situation.
Yeah. Also, Aditya, I take it that you're from India. If you've heard the phrase Kudrat ka Nizam, Saklan coined it. He's the one who said that it's all nature. Mother Nature comes into play and all of that sort of stuff. Anyway, another big game. It's not a big game, but I love the result. The West Indies, they chased down 326 versus England in Antigua last night, which is their second highest chase ever in ODI cricket. So congratulations to the West Indies. I'm happy some good is happening finally. And I want to talk about the transformation of Shai Hope as an ODI batter. Now, he demoted himself to the middle order. Of course, he's captaining this side. Do not forget that he's the captain right now as well. And he always had the average, right? He just went on to tie Virat and Viv as the third fastest batter to 5,000 ODI runs. Only Babar and Amla are ahead of him. So,
fastest.
Yeah. He's got the average numbers, and the problem was the strike rate. Shai Hope was striking at 77.5 or something like that in his ODI career, which is not a small sample size by any means. And he batted with a strike rate of nearly 130 in this game and scored an unbeaten match-winning ton. Do you guys think that we're finally seeing the peak of Shai Hope?
So I commentated this game for TalkSport. In fact, if you want to listen, we're live streaming everything on YouTube for the commentary, which you can follow along. And so I did some research on him during the game. I think his strike rate this year, and this is before he started smashing the ball at the end of this game, was already up around 90, 95. He's never had anything like this before. So clearly, I think two things have happened. One, he's batting in a much better position. Opening the batting is not a good position for him because the man doesn't really like boundaries for long periods of time. So he's much more suited to batting at number 4. He's a very good player as spin as well. And I think the other thing with him is that in being a captain, it's great to have this incredible record of averaging so much and whatever. But I did a thing a few years ago where you could see like the worst strike rates comparatively by era. And it's like Jeff Marsh and Shai Hope. And I think it might have been like Will Porterfield. Like they are all massively below everyone else, right? When you're a captain, I just don't think you can get away with that. Right? Like at a certain point, I just don't know if you could say, come on, guys, we've got to score faster. And everyone's like, how are you, boss? And so I do think that has played a part, but also playing in the right position. He is maturing. He should be. I don't think people understand what would he be? 30, 31, I want to say.
30. I think he's 30.
I don't think people understand what a prodigal talent he was. He came into the side.
Twin hundreds at Headingley, right?
Yeah, but he came into the side really, really young. Everyone thought he was going to be the next big thing. It's a little bit like what we're seeing with a lot of these Sri Lankan batters as well, that like slow curve of actually maturing into the player you want them to be. He should be around his peak now. This is probably when he should be playing Test cricket again as well. He's also maybe one of the few ODI specialists in the world, right? Of like, he's really put a lot of time into getting better into it. And you talk about his strike rate. If you have a look at that innings, Romario Shepherd won that game for them. I'm not throwing Shy. Shy was almost as important, but Romario Shepherd was the difference because he just came out and started hitting sixes out of everything, and that completely shook England, and they didn't know how to handle it. But then when Shy needed to hit fours and sixes, he started doing that, and that's the thing that we hadn't seen a lot of him. I know when I worked in around West Indies cricket, there was a lot of talk about how he was very selfish and played for himself. He's an older person now. He's probably thinking more about his legacy. He's captaining the team, all these different things. But he was still scoring at a run of ball in that innings, and they needed 2 runs a ball, right? But when he came good, it was incredible. And they need someone to bat around, right? In the same way that Afghanistan need the same thing. He is the only player they can bat around. Was it Karti? I think made like 19 of 100 balls in that game. That's how it felt anyway. Right. And Karti's quite young and he's like the next Shy Hope, really. They've got a lot of players that are still works in progresses and a lot of older players who, are not maybe in always available or in peak fitness when they are available and everything else. But I thought it was a fantastic innings. But I don't want to take anything away from Shepherd, who was fantastic. And not to mention, Shafane Rutherford played one of the best 3-ball innings you will ever see. He came out, his first ball in one-day internationals, he hit for 6. The next ball, he should have been given out LBW and got away with a DRS. And the following ball was a half-tracker, which he hit that straight down the throat of someone on the field. It's an absolutely beautiful 6 off 3. I won't hear anything against Shafane Rutherford. Long may that kind of innings continue.
Yeah, Peshawar Zalmi represent, and I like how you pointed out Romario's innings. I thought Alec Athenaeus, sure, he didn't go at that big a strike rate, but we've seen how he's a youngster who's really come and made some headlines in international cricket, scored some runs versus India as well. But Estelle, I just also want to ask you: do you feel like this is, or are we witnessing the coming of age moment in Shai Hope's ODI career?
I think a lot of people will hope so, right? With West Indies having done so badly in the recent past. It's weird with this result. I just couldn't help but think what would have happened if they were at the World Cup, because there were a lot of middling or bad, like teams that were bad, right? So I can't imagine they would have been too far away from maybe Sri Lanka or Netherlands, or maybe even matching someone like England or Bangladesh, right? So it's been interesting to see. I think, back to your point on Hope, he's always been like that player who everyone knew is good, but just wasn't playing the type of cricket that was allowing them to be successful, right? So yeah, I hope he certainly has that talent. I think it's been more of a kind of a mindset thing where he hasn't been scoring quickly, or maybe he's selfish, we don't know. But like, things are changing, definitely. Like Jared said, maybe he's thinking of different things now. Priorities are different. But yeah, one game, I don't know if you can say it's changing, but people would certainly hope so.
I asked him.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go, mate.
No, I asked him this question actually during the PSL. He was representing the Lahore Qalandars for a couple of games. And I said, people don't really think of you as that sort of batter in the T20 mold, but you batted well today. So what's the story there? I'm paraphrasing right now. I tweeted this presser question, so whoever's interested can go look for it. But he basically said that his role was that of a run accumulator in ODI cricket. And, he has to bat according to that role. So maybe now coming to the middle order and taking on the responsibility of captain has freed him up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, no one has to score a strike rate of 75, right? Like, I mean, I get it. I get what he's saying. But, Joe Root's role was as a run accumulator as well, right? Virat Kohli's role is as a run accumulator. Like, if you strike at 75, you're taking the piss. What I thought was quite interesting about it was the fact that England got themselves into a situation again where I thought that they went... They lost a lot of wickets rotating the strike again, despite the fact that the Harry Brook one was probably the one where they attacked too hard. But they still ended up getting over 300 on what looked like a difficult pitch. In fact, both teams actually batted quite well on what was a weird pitch. Some balls kept low and, balls coming on really weirdly. But the reason I point all this out is what actually happened in that game is their death ball lead completely fell down at the end. So they actually finally found some form with their batters and got themselves into a position where they were ahead of the game and still lost. It's like nothing is working for England anymore.
Yeah, you spoke of taking the piss, right? And Sam Curran also nearly conceded 100 runs, 0 for 98. And this is the guy who everyone was raving about as a very, very fine death bowler because he was the man of the tournament in the T20 World Cup. But his trajectory as a limited overs bowler since and after that IPL deal has really nosedived, Jared. And I know you have a lot to say about this.
But did you see his sunglasses?
When he batted, who does he think he is, man? He thinks he's Guru Singha. There's a throwback to 1996 that for people who are old enough to remember that reference. But I think I've been proved right over a period of time that he was perhaps a little bit lucky in that World Cup. But I also think that teams started thinking about him. He was so good in that World Cup, and they started planning for him. And you could see Romario Shepherd, walking across and just going, "You're not going to bowl wide Yorkers to me, right? You're not going to be able, I'm going to take that away from you. What do you have other than wide Yorkers? Your slow balls aren't particularly good." To be fair, that was a terrible surface for slow balls. Everyone's slow balls got smashed, but more so Sam Curran's than anyone else's. His slow ball isn't that elite. He doesn't have the extra pace or anything else. And again, it's a problem for England going forward because I don't know when you bowl him, but he's also such a handy batter. I mean, he was really good with a bat in this game of how you play him. And it's a very similar problem that they had with Moeen Ali, where essentially you have this all-rounder who's in the team, but the main reason you want them in the team for, they maybe don't do particularly well. And so then you're like, well, their batting isn't really that good either. And so they've had this issue before. In a perfect world, if Moeen Ali was like 3 years younger, you would almost match them up in the way that Jadeja and Moeen Ali used to match up for Chennai. We just need 4 overs between you, right? And England just need 10 overs between them to work. But that's not what the future is probably of English cricket. So that would mean that, Livingston and Curran would have to get the 10 overs. Livingston bowled very well in this game in a very helpful surface for him. But in general, Livingston's not going to get you anywhere near 10 overs. And they probably want him to be the 6th bowler anyway, more often than not. It just means it's all a bit messy again for them. It's not like the glory days where everyone was an all-rounder, right? Like their all-rounders are either really old or really damaged now.
I think that's the reason why the cricket has suffered in ODIs in particular. But anyway, super chat time. Bloody bugger says why boards are still organizing ODIs even though World Cup is in 4 years. Example, 3 ODIs for India versus South Africa. Who is watching these games? Well, I mean, Pakistan has got you sorted. They're not playing any ODI cricket. What do you want over here? Bloody bugger.
The reason is they're still making money. I thought this was the FTP where they could have phased them out. This is what I thought was a little bit hypocritical of some of the boards who were like, one day cricket is dying. ICC, what are you going to do about it? And it's like, well, you're still playing them, mate. If you think it's dying, stop playing them. So yeah, they're still making money. Is the cheap the best answer for this? And so they'll keep playing them. But yeah, it's getting worse and worse. It feels like now we finish a World Cup and like someone's playing within 2 days in some format of cricket that we don't need them to play in again. The one thing I would say is, bloody bugger, that you're saying, why are they organizing ODIs even though World Cup is 4 years away? Remember that the Champions Trophy is 2 years away and some people still care about that.
Also, Victor Siwafiwe, excuse me if I've butchered your name over there, he'll be watching all 3 games live. So there you have it, right? He said that in the comments. And Prateek Jha is here. My man Prateek, hello to you as well. I'm just going to come back to England real quick before we go to Uganda. Of course, we saw that, they had a very, very terrible, horrific World Cup campaign. And now they're going towards youth. Harry Brook got runs. Rehan Ahmed bowled well, took 2 very crucial wickets. Are those 2 players that they're probably looking at they're looking at them as like core players who could lead England to the future?
Yeah, I mean, eventually they'll be core players. I think they still like their older core. Like there's still a lot of talent there with Bairstow and Butler and who knows about Stokes. But Wokes will still be around for a little while and everything else. But yeah, there's certainly been a missing generation that hasn't come through, that 27 to 31-year-old generation of players who were told to go out there and whack the ball as hard as possible, and it hasn't worked for them as much, right? And they haven't produced the bowlers that they would like. Rehan Ahmed bowled beautifully in this game. Worth remembering that it was pitched completely in favor of his style of bowling. But still, that he bowled very, very well. And Harry Brook, we all know if Harry. I found it weird that like everyone overreacted to Harry Brook early on, and now they're calling him a busted flush. Like there's a middle ground with Harry Brook, but he's obviously going to be a 10-year player in international cricket, and he's a fantastic player. He might have some teething problems. By the next World Cup, he should be an important part of the T20 team. By the Champions Trophy, he should be a mainstay of the one-day team, I would think. He actually, this innings, he played beautifully until the end when he probably just played a stupid shot that he didn't need to play. And that is part of the Harry Brook experience at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still think he is one of the better young players emerging in cricket. Estelle, quick question for you, and this is going to be a tough one. Would Rehan Ahmed make it into Sri Lanka's white ball teams?
I think it's, to be honest, tough right now. Because, I mean, Sri Lanka do have good spin bowling options. Hasaranga and Theekshana are definitely in the forefront. I think globally, if you look at the two of them, they're right up there. So I think it would be tough for him to get into a Sri Lankan lineup right now.
He'd be Hasaranga's backup, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. And then you have Welalage as well. I mean, he's not a leg spinner, but still, he's in there in the mix as well, who they're looking at a young player who they could groom. Anyway, time to talk about Uganda, right? They've qualified for the T20 World Cup. That dream is alive. Actually, just to let the listeners and watchers know, the title up over there was supposed to be Uganda qualify, but our colleague CS was like, nah. You have to mention the word dream in there because it is a dream. And I mean, it's a fantastic story, right? Because as gutted as I am for Zimbabwe, the fact that Uganda have made it to the big dance, it's huge because this is a country with no cricketing heritage as such, unless you go back to East Africa, right, Jarrod? Back in that 1975 World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a mainstream cricket heritage. Cricket has been there a long time, and they have produced players. And sorry to go back to Asif Karim from before, but when I did a lot of research into Asif Karim, you did realize that Uganda and Tanzania and a few other countries around that area were producing really good cricketers, and what they probably didn't have was strong teams, which is probably why East Africa became a thing, right? Whereas if you pick up 3 or 4 players from each team, you then have quite a strong little lineup. I mean, it was a messy concept, and obviously probably was never going to work in that region. But you could see why they were thinking about it. But over the last 20 years, I've been hearing a lot about Ugandan cricket. I think that I'd have to look into this a little bit, but Rwanda and Uganda got a lot of aid from England at various times, and there was a lot of pushing cricket around because they knew that there was cricket there. And I know of people who've gone over to countries in around that East Africa kind of area, maybe not Kenya, but the others, and have taken cricket bats over and everything else. So it existed, but about 5 or 6 years ago, it was clear, or maybe even more recent than that, but it was clear that they were starting to put together a decent team. And I remember trying to think, it might have been Richard Doan, who is the godfather of associate cricket, who said to me, I think this is going to be the next team that we talk about. And Papua New Guinea maybe stormed through.
I think we've lost him again. Estelle, can you hear Jarrod?
Yeah. No.
Okay. Why don't you share your thoughts on Uganda's qualification till Jarrod's back?
He's back.
He is back.
I'm never back. I don't know what's going on with my thing. Kids are probably all streaming things at the same time. Look, I think it's a really important thing for cricket going forward, and for African cricket as well. It's a problem for Zimbabwe, and I think that's almost a conversation for another day, right? On the Zimbabwean part of it. But the thing is that when something like this happens, it's a good thing for cricket, even if it looks like a bad thing, because we all grew up with Zimbabwe and we all have, a relationship with Zimbabwe. And the good thing is that teams are now made to qualify. And because of that, the team that got that act together at the right time is the one that is going through to the World Cup. And that is as it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a question for both of you guys. You probably weren't expecting it, but we've obviously talked about Uganda and how it's great that they've made it to the qualifiers, or well, the preliminary round of the T20 World Cup because they're going to be qualifiers again, right? But is Namibia the second best T20 side in Africa at this point?
As it currently stands, yes, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, Namibia, they were pretty decent over 2 World Cups, weren't they? I mean, Zimbabwe, this is the bad thing about Zimbabwe is that I actually think they have been a really good team over a little while now, and they've now missed 2 World Cups in a row, and we know it will fall apart because we've seen what has happened with them before. But I honestly do think that there's something still to Zimbabwe, and Uganda is obviously maybe a step behind Namibia. But Namibia has a lot of things that they need. They struggle at the top level, just with making enough runs to put pressure on other sides. But their bowling is really, really good, and they're a very good team in the field. So I think it's an interesting one. It's a fair shout. I mean, after this tournament, you'd have to give it to them.
Yeah, you've got David Wiesa in that team as well, and he's like a legend of T20 cricket at this point. Any thoughts, Estelle?
Yeah, I mean, after this tournament, you have to say they're up there, if not the second best team. Zimbabwe, it's a weird one because even in the ODI qualifiers, they were really good right throughout the tournament. Right throughout, they were it was pretty much nailed on that it'll be Sri Lanka and Zimbabwe, right? Going through.
Yep.
And then when things went south, they really went south. Like they couldn't get their act together after that. And of course, they're another country, like how we discussed about Pakistan and Sri Lanka, that has a lot of stuff going on at home in the administration side of things. So it can't be easy, I mean, to come through all of that and have a competitive, like a qualifier system, right? Whereas perhaps countries like Sri Lanka don't really come up against that level of competitiveness that early on in the qualifier stage. So yeah, Namibia looks good. I still think there should be, I mean, there is room for Zimbabwe and Namibia at the World Cup, but unfortunately there aren't that many spots available. But yeah, they look like a really strong team, like Jared mentioned, particularly with the ball. Like there's huge potential for them with the ball. They just need to find a few batters who can give something for the guys like Wiesa to finish off.
Yeah, maybe in the future we're headed towards a scenario where for the T20 World Cup you have a certain quota for the number of teams that could feature from a continent. And I would love for that quota to be 4 for Africa, because I want Zimbabwe to be there. Like I like Zimbabwe.
I think that's what they have now, isn't it? I think that is that's what it was, because that was an African regional qualifier.
Yeah.
It's just fewer teams.
It would be 3 then, right?
But what I'm saying is there's already a quota. They just didn't.
Oh, right.
No one expected Uganda to be this good. Let's be honest. Everyone expected this to be South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. Maybe Kenya got their act together because Kenya had played some good cricket at times over the last couple of years as well. You know, Collins Boyer and all that sort of stuff. But you know, when it came down to it, no one really assumed that Uganda was at this level. And I think it's as I said, it's a great thing for cricket. It's a terrible day for Zimbabwean cricket, but it is a great day for cricket overall that they've gone through. And you look at some of the teams. I know Oman has been in another World Cup. I know Canada has been in another World Cup, and Papua New Guinea. But it's starting to, when you look at it now, it no longer looks like just Commonwealth countries, right? It no longer looks like just cricket countries, and teams are getting there because they are qualifying, right? They're, a little bit different with, with the USA, but a lot of these other teams are qualifying and are forcing their way in and everything else. And it's a brilliant thing for cricket, and it's the way that sport should be. Apparently, you shouldn't just get automatic qualification to an event because 140 years ago, some old fat bloke wanted to have a holiday in your country. It should be because you're still very good and relevant in the sport. And I don't think we can ask for anything more than that.
Amen to that. And before we end this podcast, quickly, upon the request of our audience, what do we think about Mitchell Johnson talking smack to David Warner?
I mean, I'm in a weird position because I know both of them. I think, I was kind of there, not at the start of Mitch's media career, but around the start of his media career. We at 99.94, which you two were both involved with, he was one of the podcasters we had on, and me and him had a lot of chats. He wants to call it very straight. I think he's a if you look at the stuff he said in the media, I think sometimes he thinks people stick up for their friends a bit too much, and people stick up for, regional alliances or whatever it's been. And he tries to keep it very, very straight. I think what he said is also true, but I was at the press conference when David Warner said it. And David Warner said it in a way of, look, if they want to keep picking me, this is when I want to play my last test. But he was very clear at saying they may not pick me. I think that's different than, say, what we have seen in the past of players going, you owe me this. But I think, and I haven't talked to David Warner about this at all, I think there is a part of David Warner that thinks a year of my career was suspended because you guys overreacted to something that many cricketers were involved in, many board members and many coaches were involved in, and me and 2 other people paid the price for this. As a recompense, I would like to pick when I retire from all 3 formats. That might be the private conversation, but publicly, he wasn't like that at all. And I can only take his public comments, right? Where he basically said, yeah, this is when I would like to retire. I would love to play my last test at Sydney. Let's see how it goes. I don't think any cricketer should really do that, but there are certain cricketers who get to the level where it's automatic. I think what Mitch is saying is that perhaps David Warner's not quite at that level. And when you're being really honest with it, he's been struggling for a very long time now, David Warner. And I none of those things are not true. It also probably won't matter because I'll probably still win those tests.
Yeah, and he's probably going to score 300 in a session versus Pakistan at the SCG, right? We're all foreseeing that happen. Yeah. Estelle, when it comes to remorse, and we were having this conversation earlier where I was like, I haven't seen any remorse from Pakistan's tainted cricketers. Are you satisfied with David Warner? We did talk about Smith, and I said that I was really satisfied, but what about Warner?
Yeah, I feel like, he did his time. And again, I think you need to put into context what happened. Sure, it was cheating, but also there's been so many worse things that cricketers have done and got away with very little punishment, right? So I feel like they did their time far more than what was required. So it was a bit weird for Johnson to bring that in. I felt like his argument about why should an out of form opener be able to pick and choose when he retires and be given a farewell tour, whatever, that's fair. But the fact that he brought in that, this guy's still a villain and shouldn't be given that kind of respect was a bit weird. So I feel like Warner's done his time. There's nothing really that, what more can you expect, right, from players? And like Jared mentioned again, to me, it's very hard to imagine that only 3 people were involved in all of that.
The bowling attack. How is the bowling attack not involved in that?
Lots of people knew. Lots of people knew all the way up. It's ridiculous, right? And look, Warner's always been a bit of a villain. Like, it's his personality, it's the way he goes about it and everything. And at times he's been embraced by the Australian public, but I also feel at times the Australian public's look for a reason to think he's a bit of a dick again. And I don't know what his relationship is with Mitchell Johnson. I don't know what that is. But the larger point about the form is fine. That was, if you had said this is not a player worthy of picking when he plays his last test, and that this is a player who's been out of form for a very long time, why are we allowing this when we need to rebuild our side? Those are perfectly reasonable arguments. If you're bringing up Sandpaper Gate, it's an emotional argument at that point, and it maybe doesn't make as much sense.
I mean, he was an emotional character, and it's just a bit dumbfounding that these 2 guys won a World Cup together in 2015. So, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's drama all over, supposedly. This was a very drama-esque sort of podcast, episode 61 of Uncovered. I think it's done now, guys. Let's call it a night.
Love sports and want to write or podcast on it? Look no further than Fans with Laptops. It's a specialized course tailored for aspiring sports enthusiasts like you. Uncover the secrets of the press box, learn how to create compelling stories from scratch, and discover the best methods to share your content online. Support us on Patreon, join for exclusive perks like AMAs, live calls with me, and a vibrant Discord community. Enjoy ad-free content, early podcast episodes, and access to my emailer. Plus behind the scenes